Hello, my name's Craig Seibert, and this short web seminar is titled Separation of Church and State, Part 1, What the Constitution Actually Says. And this is one part of a several-part series on this topic. The phrase, separation of church and state, has been so widely spread in society that most people are shocked to find out that neither the phrase nor the concept as it is currently being used can be found anywhere in the founding documents of the United States of America. The phrase separation of church and state does not appear in any of the governing documents, not the Declaration, the Constitution, or the Bill of Rights. Well, if that phrase doesn't appear, what do these documents have to say about freedom of religion? Well, in fact, it is the Bill of Rights where we see the First Amendment is placed, and the Bill of Rights is considered a part of the Constitution. And this is what the First Amendment actually says. Article 1. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So this First Amendment is a hugely important part of the U.S. constitutional and constitutional law, and it deals with religion, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom to assemble, and freedom to petition the government. It's this first section, however, that people say can be distilled down into the phrase separation of church and state. But that's in fact not what it says, and so let's explore exactly what the First Amendment says as it pertains to religion. First, this First Amendment identifies the federal body, Congress. It defines the specific branch of the federal government, Congress. And then secondly, it defines the activity that Congress is not to be involved in, that is lawmaking. So Congress, a federal body, shall not make laws, and those laws should not establish a religion. So it defines the focus of what Congress and lawmaking pertains to. And then second of all, it defines the focus of that Congress shall not do anything to prohibit the free exercise of religion. So let's explore further what this means. First of all, it's significant that this concept is placed first in the First Amendment, and that religion and the freedom of religion and freedom of conscience is so highly regarded in the United States. It's also significant that there are two parts to it: the no establishment of religion as well as the no prohibiting of religion. Now here are some other variations that were considered before the final drafting was voted upon. The House Select Committee suggested this: no religion shall be established by law. A proposal during the House debate said this: Congress shall make no laws touching religion. Also from the Senate came this: Congress shall make no law establishing articles of faith or mode of worship or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And then here's the version that we've been looking at. So if you take these early variations and then also take what we have in hand, you can begin to really discern that the big idea was this: that Congress would not establish a national denomination or church, and that Congress would not establish a state-controlled church. And so these are very specific activities that Congress should not be involved in. So again, Congress, no law, establishing, prohibiting, the key words. So it's very specific in scope. So this First Amendment does not even mention the executive branch or judicial branch, and here's why. If no laws are allowed to be passed by Congress, then there's no law to be enforced by the President, or no law to be interpreted by the courts. This means the federal government was to have no jurisdiction in areas concerning the free exercise of religion. This was left to the states, cities, and local communities. There's a quote from the House Judiciary Committee almost 70 years after the Constitution reflecting on this idea. And this is what they said: had the people during the Revolution had a suspicion of any attempt to war against Christianity, that revolution would have been strangled in its cradle. At the time of the adoption of the Constitution and the amendments, the universal sentiment was that Christianity should be encouraged, but just not any one sect. In this age, there can be no substitute for Christianity. That, in its general principles, is the great conservative element on which we must rely for the purity and permanence of free institutions. And so it was saying here that any animosity toward Christianity would have been completely against the founding principles and belief. Further, that Christianity in general could be and should be encouraged even by the government, just not any one sect, for its value to society. And then thirdly, that the very institutions of our free society were undergirded by the general principles of Christianity. What this meant in practice then was this, that there was all kinds of religious freedom in the public domain. Consider this: Congress could have prayer, have chaplains, have Bible studies, have a church service in the Capitol in the 1800s, and even print the morals and teachings of Jesus in 1910 for distribution to congressmen, both representatives and senators. Presidents could call for prayer, talk about God, call the nation to follow God, talk about biblical principles in government. Courts could have prayer, appeal to the Ten Commandments, look to the Bible for principles. At a state and local government level, they could post the Ten Commandments, have prayer before meetings. On state or local seals, symbols, letters, and monuments, they could have mottos such as "In God We Trust" or "With God All Things Are Possible." They could have crosses and biblical symbols, and they could have Bible verses, and none of those would violate the First Amendment. Going further, in public schools, they could have daily morning prayer. They could post the Ten Commandments. They could study the Bible as a part of education. They could have prayer at graduation. They could have students express faith in coursework and speeches. They could post quotes about the Founders' faith. They could say the Pledge of Allegiance, one nation under God, and they can even have prayer at sporting events. At U.S. Civics training, we have gathered a tremendous amount of evidence that the Founding Fathers' thoughts on Christianity and civil government. There's hundreds of quotes from a variety of Founding Fathers on the importance of biblical principles and the role of government. George Washington, in fact, brings this up as the first point in his inauguration address, in his prayer proclamations, and his farewell address. All emphasize God's place and involvement in public affairs and the need to recognize Him. Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin, considered maybe some of the least religious of the Founding Fathers, have studies of their own showing that, in fact, they were very supportive of biblical principles and ideas as undergirding principles in serving as the foundations for our free institutions and our governing documents. As I wrap up this section, it's interesting to note that the Congressional records of June 7th to September 25th, 1789, when the Bill of Rights was being debated, there's a record of the 4 months of discussions and debates. Of the 90 Founding Fathers who framed the First Amendment, not one of those 90 ever mentioned the phrase separation of church and state. Historian D. Barton says this: "It seems logical that if this had been the intent for the First Amendment, as is so frequently asserted, then at least one of those 90 who framed the amendment would have mentioned that phrase. None did." So again, what our Bill of Rights and Constitution actually says is Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. To explore this topic further, please take a look at the other web seminars on separation of church and state. My name is Craig Seibert. Thanks for listening.